me running. We're going to have to start over.
Okay.
Howdy, all you beautiful folks across cyberspace, and welcome to episode 2 of Deck Documentation. We have a name now and a script. Today we're going to be taking a look at another Netrunner deck that is off the beaten path, possibly slightly, possibly severely, definitely successfully. My name is Dr. Argon for short, and I'm joined in the Discord studio by the architect of today's deck, Wigglestick, a longtime member of the Colorado metagame. Say hi, Wigglestick.
Hello.
Now, for those not in the know, Wigglestick, you would consider yourself a more casual Netrunner player who doesn't pay terribly much attention to the competitive metagame. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yet here you are, coming off a Top Cut appearance at Omaha District Championships and just barely missing out on a Top Cut appearance at Boulder District Championships with the same two decks. How does that make you feel?
Weird. That wasn't supposed to happen. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Well, what happened is that you won some games of Netrunner, and now we're going to talk about one of your decks. Specifically, the one I want to talk about today is the one that went undefeated in Boulder, and was the most egregious runner deck in the tournament that day. Your Tāolassophobia deck, also known as Tāolassophobia. So, the way this is going to work is, I've prepared a list of questions I believe will help give people more insight into the inner workings of the deck. I've given them to Wigglestick ahead of time, so the only thing that might catch him off guard is the wording. We will also have the deck list in the video description. Now without further ado, let's get the ball rolling.
Excellent.
So, aside from the fact that you're a self-described weird hipster, what made you interested in building a DAO deck in this meta, and how much experience with DAO were you drawing on when you built this deck?
So, yeah, like you said, I don't pay much attention to the greater meta or the competitive scene or anything like that. So, I built a Tau deck because it sounded fun. Um, Ice swapping and painting have always been two of the most interesting parts of the Shaper color pie to me. Since I was, a baby runner first learning the game, that always caught my eye. And so, I was a big fan of like Inversificator, which saw kind of a resurgence right before it rotated, and then a really old cut Escher, if anybody remembers that card. Um, and so once Deep Dive got unbanned, I was looking at it. I was kind of looking to try a different runner than I had been playing for a while, and Tau popped up, and I was thinking, this actually, the way I play Shaper, the way I play Tau, it makes a lot of sense that I could probably use Tau, Hermes, and the new card Sipa together to enable easier deep dive runs. That was the hope, and it ended up actually working out better than I expected.
Mhm. Yeah, and we're actually going to be talking about all three of those cards during this discussion. So I will say, having just played against a DAO deck for the first time recently, or maybe not for the first time, but I think definitely the DAO Hermes shell, it is really weird to play against.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Mhm.
And we'll touch on
And-
it. That's one of the big strengths, I think.
mhm. All right. So how would you describe the basic game plan of this deck, and what would you say are its key cards?
Sure. So, um, the basic game plan is as Tau, and then also with Hermes kind of suggest, it's restructure the board, restructure all of the ice in your favor to just make easy deep dive runs. Um, there's more to it, but that's the initial plan. And like you had just said, actually, that's a big part of the game plan too, is to use that, like you said, the difficulty of playing against the deck to its advantage. It can be extremely difficult for the corp to predict what your avenues of attack can be after you start swapping ice around and start bouncing things. There's a little bit, people talk about anticipating the Tau swaps and then kind of installing ice where they don't want it to be, so that Tau swaps it to where they do want it to be. But as more and more things end up on the board, that just gets harder and harder to do because and in addition, the corp is having to juggle that with their game plan they're trying to execute on their own anyway. And
Mhm.
so, like we kind of already called out a little bit, you had asked about the key cards in the deck. The key cards that kind of pull all of this together and make it work are, obviously Tau himself, Hermes, Sipa, Deep Dive is kind of the payoff, and then Pishasau is a little bonus that gives you some extra kickflip potential.
So it's much more in the vein of those shaper kickflip decks, then you would say.
A little bit. It's definitely less kick flippy than some of the Shaper BS I've made. Um, but it has a fair amount of that still if you choose to exercise it.
I mean, that makes sense. Um, I don't know. Shaper it's the sort of thing that I feel like I wouldn't be able to enjoy the gameplay of it if I could wrap my head around it.
Sure, yeah.
Uh, mhm. so, all right, let's cut to the chase. Is Deep Dive the best Shaper card in Vantage Point?
That is a difficult question. Uh, it might be. Well, okay. So if we want to say counting Vantage Point cards and the rotation that came, or the ban list changes that came along with it, um, that might be hard to say because, as everyone has kind of been noting, the runner side of VP was a little on the sketch side. So, yeah, out of that combination, it might just be the best Shaper card. Touchstone's in the running though, because a lot of people really like Touchstone.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. So I know that are some people that have been saying that it was the best Shaper card in Vantage Point. It's just I have not seen a whole lot of successful uses of Deep Dive. I think the closest, like
Hmm.
obviously people are still using Deep Dive and Shaper, but it's this may be news to you since you don't pay attention to the metagame, but Shaper is still the least represented runner faction. And there have been some good showings with it. I know that there was someone I forget their name who came in second at the online EMEA districts over this weekend with a Magdalene deck, not the Magic Woman deck that everyone is terrified
Hmm.
of,
Right.
but a different one that was also executing a combo, except this one was revolving around Deep Dive, and it actually made it as far as the finals. Uh,
Yeah, I think I
I
might have heard
just
about that.
feel, yeah, it just feels as though between Flagship and Border Control, most certainly Red Room, and just a number of the Corp tools that we've gotten in Vantage Point, I haven't really seen a lot of successful deep dives being pulled off.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I was really apprehensive about the deep dive unban, uh, and I think there was some amount of that in the air at the time too. It's just not the monster it once was, apparently. And given that I don't pay attention to everything all the time, I don't know exactly why that is. I do suspect it's like things like Event Horizon, like you mentioned, Red Room exists, stuff like that. Do lessen its impact a bit, but it's still good.
Yeah, it definitely seems like one of the things that Shaper has going for it at the moment. I would not necessarily say that like every Shaper would want to be running it as its win condition, but it sounds like it's one that you have explicitly built around in how you've assembled this deck. Uh, so and it's been working for you clearly,
Hmm.
with the performance that it's had. What I want to say 5-1 in matches over two districts.
That that sounds right. I think actually, weirdly enough.
Mhm. Yeah, it I mean it at least it can still put up some amount of results. I'm between you and a couple of the other decks that I've seen, I'm not surprised that it still has this presence in the metagame. It's just definitely shaping out not to be shaping out not to be one of the top defining forces in the metagame.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, to those of us in the Denver metagame, it hasn't exactly been a secret that your actual favorite Shaper card from Vantage Point, and possibly Vantage Point as a whole, because we recorded a whole 2-hour hypecast about the set, and I still completely forgot what your favorite card in the set itself was, but my guess is that it would be SEPA. So, what was the actual purpose behind putting SEPA in this deck, and how has it performed relative to your expectations?
Sure. So initially, it was, as we had talked about previously, I just like that part of Shaper with the ice swapping. And so obviously I was immediately drawn to it. And it started out I just kind of wanted to test it out. And I put it in the deck a little bit on a whim, and it was like this is definitely going to be too much ice manipulation with Tau and Hermes. Like I'll end up with it in a bunch of situations where I have no more ice to swap and it doesn't have that much value anymore, and it's just consuming 2 MU. But I wanted to test it, just see what happened. And pretty quickly, I started seeing a lot of lines with it where it very quickly shot to the top of the list in terms of how valuable it was to the game plan overall and the sorts of things it enabled. Um, and so it's just more tau per tau, you know. Um,
It lets you Tau outside of a scoring window.
Exactly right. People have talked about this at length. I don't really need to go into all the details of exactly what SEPA does necessarily, but like, you can use it to do the same thing you're doing with Tau. Swap ice around to make the specific servers you need to hit. In the case if you're trying to do a deep dive, you can move the ice between HQ and R&D. You put it where you need it to be. You can move it off of the centrals. You can use it to surf inward, which is really fun. Um, in cases where that matters, where it's like you can break a piece of ice for 1 or 2 credits. You do so, you swap it, you just break it for 1 or 2 credits again, and you're in for pennies. But one of the just so one of the things that kind of very quickly I started realizing and started playing around more and more. I'll just rattle off a real quick combo with it. You can uh, install Peach. So click one is install Peach Sao on an outer ice of a central server. Click two, you run that server. When you break the ice and get through it, you swap the Pisha Sao ice with another ice on another central, or surf it inward if need be. But you gain your click back from Pisha Sao from that. You can then, complete that run. Click three, run the server that you swap the ice onto. When you pass the ice, Pisha Sao returns to hand. You get a click back, get into that server, and then last click or fourth click, I guess technically, whatever, you run the last central archives or whatever it is, and you at this point have 2 clicks remaining. So then you can do a double dive. And this sort of gameplay, and there's some obviously a lot of wiggle room in exactly things that can be installed during that turn, but this sort of thing is really common with this deck. It's way easier to set up and way easier to execute than it sounds. And I've had a lot of luck with pulling off plays similar to that. Um, and this adds to what we were talking about earlier, or is an instance of it can be very difficult for the corp to see something like that coming or to predict where they need specific pieces of ice to be when you're swapping things around a bunch.
I'm looking at the components of this now, and oh man, this probably doesn't work. But if you have the Pichasau installed, there's not a paidability window like as the trigger is resolving for it, right? So you can't, with the trigger on the stack, sack it to a simul chip to reset whether or not it's returning itself to your hand.
You could. I mean, you could like between ice. You can't after the second click that you gain from it, but you can after the first one.
Okay. I'm just trying to think about like ways to make it even more broken than it is.
Hmm.
But this I'm still getting used to the timing rules in this game
Oh,
after
sure.
entirely too many years in the Magic the Gathering mines.
Well, I mean, you brought up simulchip, and like that's a
Mhm.
good point. Is a lot of everything I just said is kind of assuming that you have everything in hand or on board already. Um, the more simulchips you have, the more you could like click one draw and then maybe draw into an essential piece and then run, and then you can start using simul chips to move Pisha Sows around instead of installing it, or all sorts of weird stuff like that. So um,
Yeah, the simul to Pichusau synergy, it definitely exists, even if it's not, to the crazy level that I thought it could potentially be. But it definitely just shows like the fact that you have this ability to mid deep dive turn reposition the Pichusau with the SEPA.
mhm.
Definitely helps with trying to get this sort of thing off.
Yeah, that was very fun when I figured that out, and started
Mhm.
seeing that sort of play happen more and more, and seeing
Was
lines
was that
for it.
was that a line that you figured out like during an actual tournament or a game, or did you build the deck with the intention of potentially doing this, or were aware of it before you actually shuffled it up?
I actually don't remember if I was aware of it before sleeving it, but it was definitely before the first tournament. I started as I was playing around with the deck and sat. I had a turn where I just kind of sat back and said, "Oh, I could do this," and then started running with it. Um,
I feel so bad for whoever your testing partner was because they're the first one just sitting there being like, "Wait, what's going
yeah,
on?"
yeah, yeah,
And while you're still in the "I don't know, but it seems to be working" phase
yeah, exactly.
of executing the combo.
That's always so much fun.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also, I just want to point out too, like, so SEPA is kind of generally has a reputation of being a pretty mid to underpowered card, and I don't know, that may be correct. Whatever. I've had a lot of luck with it. I really enjoy it. But it does give you a ton of flexibility in a lot of these things if you kind of retrain your brain to, see the board in that way. Um, and like the example I just gave was here's how you use it for a big fancy 2-click deep dive. But even more mundanely than that, it can also just really help, again, kind of with this ice confusion, ice swapping thing. It can help you make really quick pivots to remote camping if you need to. Um, once you, like, if both deep dives are out of the game, or if you realize it's just not going to be feasible anymore, start running. You've stacked a bunch of easy to bypass ice on centrals, run it, swap it over with SEPA, and then to the remote, and now you can start stacking the remote the same way you were stacking the centrals.
Yeah, that seems it's definitely going to cause a lot of uh, confusion in the court player potentially to have to play against. Your ice jumping all over the board,
Hmm.
and I know that I don't know that people have necessarily been saying that negative stuff about SEPA because I haven't been paying as much attention to that as I probably should be. I do know that there was a Dewi Subrotoputri list that was posted yesterday that someone was running SEPA with 3 copies of Compromat from
Hmm.
also from Vantage Point, and that was a combo that a couple of us have talked about before of just being able to like run a server where there's only this one unresed piece of ice protecting it, swap it, sorry, no, one resed piece of ice protecting it, swap it with an unresed piece of ice, and now I've gotten into that server and you have to take the bad pub.
Yep. No,
So,
that I laughed very hard when somebody explained that to me the first time.
yeah, it definitely feels like it's capable of enabling these kinds of weird tricks
Hmm.
that that it's just shaper things, I guess. We talk about being shaper brained in some cases, and you're really maximizing that with and especially with this card.
Hmm.
Speaking of shaper cards, you're using a lot of influence on two copies of Hermes. Why do you have to be such a sweaty tryhard all the time?
Because it's so hard not to. Okay, so it's I I have succumbed to the Hermes Tau BS because it's just so good. It's just so good. It's I kind of, I wish that there was more justification to run other consoles out of Tau, but Hermes exists, and I can't pass it up. And so obviously then, we, as we've kind of talked about throughout this whole thing so far, um, if the plan is to do some pretty extreme ice manipulation to be able to land a quest, then Hermes just it fits right into that plan because it's anytime an agenda scored or stolen, not only are you swapping, you're also bouncing, and so there can be large tempo hits to the corp that way. And the Hermes, like, this is, I'm kind of retreading old ground because Hermes has been out forever, but Hermes is part of that plan that we also have been talking about, where it just adds a bunch of extra mental load to the corp often. um, they either have to plan around the way they score agendas, so that they have a click left over to reinstall the ice or upgrade or whatever was just bounced, or and more often they just don't think about that, or they don't try to account for it, and it kind of screws up their plans, and then really commonly they end their turn with 6 cards and they have to pitch something, and there's just all this extra stuff they're having to start deal with now, because of Hermes.
Yeah, in the game that I played against Hermes Dow last night, I was on Bad Pubs Vicky,
Mhm.
and on the one hand, Reanimation Protocol being able to skirt the potential for Hermes bouncing the ice that you just painstakingly installed felt really good. Although, having my Beowax shuffled onto archives and then shuffled off archives so that archives could be attacked and have an agenda stolen
Hmm.
from it
Hmm.
did not feel as good. But it was also noteworthy that early on in the game, I installed a Winchester on HQ, expecting that when the game ended, the Winchester would be on a different server from HQ. And at the actual end of the game, it was in my hand
Hmm.
because it was the one piece of ice on the board that for whatever reason never got res, and I kept reinstalling it,
Right.
and it kept not being run, and it kept getting bounced.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of pattern happens all the time. Where, because once you bounce it the first time, you now have to then spend a click, at least maybe credits, to reinstall it. And, and then that's like, more delay, more tempo loss from you and then more chances for it to get rebounced again later. I see that sort of thing happen all the time where this single piece of ice just keeps getting bounced over and over again. And actually, kind of along those lines, there was a game I was playing at one of the events where, somebody was very desperately, like, just, I can't remember the game state, but I knew that was an agenda, and they were very desperately trying to get the agenda scored. Um, and I kept hitting little one pointers, in places, and so I kept bouncing the agenda back to hand, and it kept delaying this longer and longer. They weren't able to get the agenda scored.
Wow. Could
Yeah,
get
it's a
into
lot of
the
fun
remote. Oh my god.
because that's a lot of people when they play Hermes, like, sometimes some of the most obvious things to bounce are ice.
Mhm.
Duh. But you sometimes you have to, like, because, and I will tunnel vision on that too sometimes, and then I'll snap out and be like, oh wait a minute, actually if I bounce the advanced thing in the remote, because that's an option, that's like going to be more tempo loss than this ice or whatever. So
Yeah, that's as a criminal player, I am definitely used to that sort of play pattern, if only because if you know that there's an agenda in the remote and you have a loaded compilation on board, sniping an agenda from HQ and then bouncing the remote agenda into HQ in the middle of your cup sweep
Yep.
is so much fun.
Yes.
So much fun for the runner.
Hmm. Yeah.
The corp maybe a little bit less so, but I think that that kind of just describes Hermes in general.
Hmm.
It takes this uh it takes the board shape uh reassembly that you've got going on with the SEPA and the DAO and just turns it just kicks it into overdrive, of
Yeah.
just the the board is your playground and the corp is suddenly having to fight you on an axis that they probably weren't even aware existed.
Exactly. Right. And
Mhm.
then yeah, it causes them to have to burn more brain cells trying to figure out how to recover from certain things, and then they have to, they had a whole I'm going to install advance this, but oh wait, my plan's thrown off. I'm now an entire like click or more off of what my tempo plan I thought I was on is, and they have to completely recalibrate and they start making mistakes. So Hermes might be too good. I think that's probably the lukewarmest take ever, but as much fun as I do have with it, I wouldn't be too sad to see it gone.
I mean, it as someone who played only like really during the Katara cycle and Reign and Reverie, and also admitted to being criminal pilled. I liked playing Leela Patel,
Oh, sure.
and that is an ability that is interesting on an ID. On a console,
Right. When you can
that
mix and match it with any ID?
that's also the cheapest criminal console in standard.
Exactly.
If it weren't for the fact that it's like the entire backbone that the criminal faction is standing on right now, I'm not sure how I'd feel about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be very interested to see how well things hold up with it gone. I suspect it could go and things would be okay.
Yeah, I mean it well, it's really interesting when you take a look at like okay, we're veering dramatically off
Oh,
course,
sure.
but it's yeah, this is we do this. We're netrunner play. We're two white guys. We were sitting in a room and a microphone spontaneously grew between us, and we just started talking as though were authorities on anything.
Yeah.
So this is just the natural progression of cause to effect at this point. Looking at the data on the Maker's Eye for this standard format, it's absolutely an inverse of all of the complaints that people had about the elevation meta, where it's like, oh, corporation is miserable. Corporations can't do anything. I don't want to play corp. Corp is terrible. And now it's just like corporations have a 56.7 and rising win rate across the board. So and we can look at all the different IDs and see that roughly half of the criminal not the criminal the corporation IDs actually have a positive win rate. Then for runners, it's Seb,
Hmm. Yep.
literally just Seb,
Yep.
and with Muslihat in second place at a 50% win rate at a literal coin flip. So which on the one hand, based on the content I've been consuming, I kind of get the impression that that was the point of Vantage Point, was to take that dynamic from elevation meta and try to correct for it.
Hmm.
And we're in a situation where it's maybe been overcorrected for. And some people I think are fine with that. I can't run to save my life, so I'm not. But I'm working on it. I'm
Sure,
working on it.
sure.
It's a skill in progress. We'll
Yeah,
fix
we'll
it in
get you there.
post.
We'll get you there.
Uh-huh. But yeah, so if this was elevation meta, I think I would feel better about a Hermes ban than I do now.
Sure. That's fair.
Yeah, let's try to get back on track now, and let's talk about your icebreaker suite. Now, yours is, to my complete and total astonishment, not the only Dow deck that has been seeing success in this district's season.
Hmm.
There've been a couple posted on NRDB. I think Megalith was the main one. It's a Laria creation, also on the Hermes train that managed to get first at the Barcelona districts back in March.
Very cool.
Uh, and so most of these subsequent Tau decks have been iterations on this Megalith list, and it is on a much more ephemeral icebreaker suite of Gauss, Propeller, Euler, and Echelon being the only one that is, meant to come into play and stay in play and function as well as or better as it was when it was installed as the game goes on. You have opted for a more robust breaker suite of triple propeller plus rising tide and unity, but with revolver as your only answer to sentries. What made you opt for this breaker suite, and have you encountered any problems as a result of it?
Yeah, good question. So the the ephemeral breakers are extremely powerful for the turn they're installed, right? That's the whole point.
Mhm.
And they required, the extra support of being able to reset them, which your shaper, that's what you do, but it does take tools to do that. In theory, and this mostly bears out most of the time. The ice manipulation that I'm doing is kind of the replacement for the hyper efficiency. If I can just keep moving, the little dinky ice onto whatever server I'm running, then I don't need the extra power from the Oilers and the Gausses and stuff. Um, and I value having the simul chips a bit more available for the extra, because now I'm running these extra utility programs, SIPA and Pishasau, um, Coalescence if I'm desperate. Uh, and so I wanted to make sure that the simul chips were around to be able to move those around and perform extra tricks and things, and surprise the corp with runs they didn't think I was going to be able to make. So
And yeah,
yeah,
just feed a spare propeller to the simul chip. All of a sudden, Peaches House back on board,
yeah,
and
exactly.
it's just an entire Beach Boys album all
Hmm.
the way down.
Yep, yep, very much so.
I could also see you like having scenarios, especially against like a Wayland deck or a Jinteki deck.
Sure.
I mean, I guess that Wayland is, usually barriers, but Biowak and Border Control are both cards. So, not Border Control, Event
Event
Horizon.
Horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I could also see scenarios where your revolver is incredibly taxed, and because of that, it also starts either taxing your simul chips or taxing how you can perform the ice swaps.
Hmm.
And so I'm just curious, is that something that you've run into?
Surprisingly, no. A little bit sometimes, but not nearly as much as I was expecting. Um, the strategy for Event Horizon is swap it, move it to a server that you're never going to run. Um, the if possible, obviously. Um, the propellers are just hyper. The redundancy of the propellers gives me a lot of robustness there, and I kind of don't care if they end up if I expend them very quickly, because I'm replacing them all the time until I get my rising tide out.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, no,
yeah,
that's why I consider the fractor part of the breaker suite to be really robust. Is
for
that
sure.
it
Yeah.
once you've worked your way through the propellers, bam, rising tide hits the
Hmm.
board, and it is a 1 credit 4 strength fractor
Yep.
that boosts itself for 1.
Yep. Unity's just great. Obviously it's a slow burn, but once it gets going, it's great. And revolver, I was very worried about just having a single revolver. It's not normally the way I play my breaker suites, but uh, I have found that one revolver is more than enough. I have had to simul chip it back in to reload it, like, I don't know, maybe twice. because most of the time I just move, the really terrifying sentries away. I need to break them basically exactly the one time that I face plant into them, and then after that they're somewhere else on the board. And so that's usually been enough. It's pretty rare that I run into stuff. It can happen if draw is bad or if the game gets drawn out long enough. Propellers can, they start losing counters if there's enough gigantic barriers on the board. But for the most part, it hasn't been a problem.
Now, the one other we've talked a lot about, the shaper kick flips and the ice rearrangement. We've talked about the breakers. One thing we haven't touched on yet is the economy. Did you intend to build a deck that was 50% economy cards, or was that just a happy accident?
Definitely happy accident because that is not the way I normally build decks. I have a really bad deck building habit of putting all of the really fun shiny cards that I want to play with in the deck and then forgetting that I need money to actually use them. So uh, I'm not sure what came over me when I built this, but it's been nice. It turns out that all those people who put a lot of money in their deck may have a point, as much as I hate to admit it.
I
But
mean, yeah. So then you would say that it has had an impact on
yeah,
this
no, it's
deck's
definitely had an
success.
impact. I mean, it's kind of the general stuff you'd expect from just having a ton of money is uh, more money faster means I am able to set up more quickly, means I'm able to start landing deep dives much more quickly. Um, breaking into, doing remote camps if necessary. Yeah, it's just been a really nice grease to the deck that just makes things move really smoothly.
Well, I mean, yeah, there you have it, folks. That's the secret to building a good deck. All of the money,
Just put money
just
in.
just jam more econ in there. Just build a deck that is nothing but econ cards. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, unironically, yes. Actually.
Oh man, that would be funny to see.
hmm
Okay, so what advice do you have for anyone who wants to try this deck, both in terms of construction and gameplay? And related to that, are there any cards you'd want to add to the deck or flex slots that you'd consider altering?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go through some kind of advice points first. With the initial note that nobody should be taking advice from me at all about how to play this game. So,
You
with that out
you
of the
stole
way,
six you stole 6 points in a single deep dive combo turn. That's a perfectly fine
okay.
baseline
Yeah, that was pretty
for
funny.
getting it. Yeah, for getting advice from someone. You don't just do that. You
I mean,
don't
yeah,
just do
it
that
was
by
total
accident.
skill. Yeah, no, it wasn't just that I got like a 1 in 6 and no, no, no. So, uh it's hard to tell, how much of this is just my play style, but with this deck, you're playing Shaper, you're setting up for a little combo here and there. So it's fine to play a little bit of install runner at the top of the game. Um, just sit back, just draw and get a couple things set up first. Obviously, early revolvers are really nice just so you can face check as necessary. Or face check to start probing and seeing what's where. Uh, because it is really when you are playing these these ice swap decks, you want unresed ice to bounce with Hermes. That is cool. But you actually need a decent number of the amount of the ice resed so that you know what you're swapping where. And so you do need to make some runs early ish, early to early mid game to start figuring out where you're going to be sending the ice as agendas start getting scored. So do a little bit of probing to make sure to and goad the corp into resing some ice so that you actually can make intelligent swaps. Yeah, because that's a thing. If you're playing install runner, you don't want to get too complacent and sit back too long for that while you're doing that. When you are swapping ice, it it really depends. You can go way too hard into stacking the certain servers If you are tunnel visioning too hard on deep dive, you can end up stacking all of the most difficult ice onto a remote. Remotes are great for dumping inconvenient ice because you're trying to land deep dives. And that's cool, but when you have played both deep dives and each one only turned up a single agenda, you now have, you know, two Biowalks and a toxin on the remote. It's like, uh-oh, because you got to start running that now. So be a little bit cognizant of not overstacking certain things if you know that you're going to have to go in there later. And then along those lines, start trying to develop a feel for when it is right to pivot off of central pressure and into remotes. That just takes time to kind of get the feel for. There's some like kind of weird intangible qualitative things too for just play enough games and start kind of envisioning the board in the way that Tau and ice swapping wants you to envision it, and you will start developing kind of an intuition for when the corp is feeling safe, when they're looking at your board and they're feeling safe behind a particular piece of ice because they rezzed, let's say, a toxin or something. Not many people are actually rezzing that ice, but
It
then
is a great reanimation protocol
it's
target.
a it is
Just
a yes, that is true, fantastic. And so there you'll kind of note when they're starting to feel safe behind it because you'll kind of watch their play patterns and how they're using it. And so you kind of want to try to mask your gameplay a little bit, and then again, this rolls all the way back to kind of one of the initial points about how difficult it can be for the corp to try to suss out what you're doing or try to predict what you're going to be doing when you have all these variables going on. And so during that time, you can start, if you hit a 1 point agenda or something like, say, a Let Them Dream, then you can make ice swaps. And you may not immediately make the most aggressive ice swap. You might do something that looks slightly more innocuous. And to the corp would be like, well, why did you swap those? It doesn't really matter because they're both kind of cheap or whatever. But to you in your head, you're looking, 4 or 5 turns ahead, where the fact that you swap this, it's going to be an amazing Pishasau target for XYZ reason or whatever. And it's going to set you up for something explosive later. And you kind of want to do a little bit of this as surreptitiously as possible. Not always easy to do. It's that's kind of a weird thing to try to play around, but when you can, don't necessarily be as obvious. Don't immediately swap everything to R&D or something like that, and try to keep your Sepas and Pisha Sows hidden a little bit if possible.
yeah, so keep the SEPA hidden until you're ready to actually start using it. Keep the
Mm-hmm.
Peaches Sow hidden until you're ready to make the corpse life miserable.
Mm-hmm.
This is feeling a lot like that Kenny Rogers song, "The Gambler." You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them,
Exactly.
know
Yeah.
when to
Yeah.
walk away, know when to
Totally.
run. But okay, so it's definitely the sort of deck that like rewards time and games spent practicing it because it helps you train your brain in the way to be able to evaluate these board states in that way that you mentioned earlier that there are people who will like play against Tau by putting ice in
Mm-hmm.
servers that you don't want to like that just feels to me like you're doing the Dow player's job for them.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, that like the advantage of walking into a tournament practiced with a Dow deck is that uh you are going to know what you are doing much better than your opponents will, and uh it they will be trying to figure out how you think as a Dow player on the fly,
Mm-hmm.
whereas you've already got the time and practice of looking at these board states and seeing how they can be restructured to your advantage.
Yep. Exactly.
All right, perfect.
And so you had asked about changes to the deck.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I've looked at this. There's definitely room for improvement, but probably the biggest thing in the deck that I've gone back and forth on trying to figure out what to do with are the pinhole threadings. So I have two copies in there, and pinhole threading is a phenomenal card, obviously. Um, the reason that I put it in the deck, primarily, like initially at least primarily, was out of fear of flagship, because flagship would shut down deep dive plays. So I wanted to make sure I had pinhole threadings, like, run archives to hit the flagship on HQ or whatever, and then I can make a run on HQ and like do this as part of a deep dive play. Um, I have yet to encounter a single flagship, and I don't know why. I don't know why people aren't playing this card, but I think all told, in all of the games I've played with Tau so far, I've this iteration of Tau at least, I've played pinhole threading maybe twice or maybe three times. I'm not sure. Like it's incredibly rare that I actually end up playing it, and I almost always end up just discarding it. So I've tried to figure out if it's worth swapping to something else, and I don't know. But it feels wrong to get rid of, and so I'm happy to just keep it in. It's just nice insurance. I'm not sure. There are lots of things you could replace it with that might make sense in the deck. Like Praxis might be really interesting, because you can use it as part of a deep dive turn if need be, or you can use it to obviously recur anything that you need to recur for whatever reason. Bahia Bands is cool. Maybe a Wheels if you feel like you want a little bit of extra remote support. Um, for those games where you're not trying to deep dive as hard. And then I was looking through the cards, and seeing what could go in that slot, and there's a lot of really fun things that are a little off, kind of a off kilter.
Mhm.
Window of opportunity, tread lightly would be funny. Scrounge, I'm not sold on Scrounge, but it would fit, and it's kind of funny. Lucky Charm might hilariously kind of work in some cases. So, I,
I mean, that's what it's there for.
yeah.
And I keep getting copies of it when I participate in the online showdowns. So
Hmm.
you got to put them somewhere, right?
Yeah. So that's been the biggest question mark for me, is the pinhole threadings, because it feels wrong to get rid of them, but I've never needed them, so I'm not sure what to do about it.
I mean, on the one hand, I am never going to say no to a spicy one of Wheels. On the other hand, it has not escaped my notice, and maybe this is just a line of play that hasn't come up for you,
Hmm.
that you can use a pinhole threading to trigger a SEPA swap.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you want to there may be an upgrade or an asset that you want to check, but and like most of the time when we think about a pinhole threading run, we're going onto an empty server, like usually
Okay, I see what you're
archives, to
saying.
be able to get in with the pinhole threading. But if you have the SEPA in play, what you can instead do is you can pinhole threading an iced server, and then you get both the SEPA swap of breaking the outermost ice and putting it where you want it, and getting the thing that you pinholed out of the other server.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Yeah, double dipping like that is great if you can find ways to make it work.
Yeah, because if being able to set something up like that is going to be a huge amount of value, just
Hmm.
continuing to reshape the board in your favor while also just getting rid of something that the corp probably wanted to stick around. So,
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
hmm,
and that's another argument in favor of keeping the pinholes around. So.
I will be curious to see if this comes up for you, because
Hmm.
it's the sort of line. It feels like this deck is just designed to create lines of play that make you feel really clever for coming up.
I mean, sometimes I don't know. I feel a little clever sometimes.
There you go. I probably felt really clever when you were making a top cut of a districts with your brews. That's for sure.
No, I think I think it was just blind panic going through my brain at that point.
Yeah, I make fun of him about this because first of all, it's a phenomenal achievement, and second of all, Neither of us were expecting it.
No, no, not at all. But
But yeah, so then we mentioned we were going to touch on this earlier.
mhm.
So what are some of the weaknesses of the deck that people should be aware of, whether they're playing with it or against it? Does it have any particularly troublesome matchups, and how do you handle those? And I also think this was where you were considering talking about, like, when are you going to have to pivot to remote camping, like in what matchups?
Sure, yeah. So, just speaking weaknesses kind of generally, like right off the top, some of the most obvious ones are going to be corps that either don't run remotes at all, which is somewhat rare, but happens a little bit, or don't ice their remotes at all. Because if you don't have ice, you kind of don't, a lot of the tricks in the deck don't work. Granted, if they don't have ice, then deep dive lands a little more easily. But funny enough, like the flop and flume decks that are flying around right now are great here because it's a lot of really cheap one deep ice that it's just trivial to swap around and make things super easy to get into. So those are great.
Mhm.
But anything that's turtling up super hard on just HQ and R&D, maybe one remote, things can get a little hairy. I was playing against, the you had mentioned playing as Vicky deck with all the giant ice in it, and I've played against that several times, and that can get a little hairy if I can't get an immediate leg up on the corp in terms of like keeping the ice under control. Then that can snowball pretty quick in the corp's favor. So yeah, other weaknesses. This is kind of general. I don't know how much of this is shaper weakness versus just me weakness. Is losing tools to damage just sucks. Um, so I'm kind of weak to damage. Like I don't have any really damage prevention tech in the deck. I don't have any stone chip chart rooms or anything like that to try to outlive a measured response or recover from incessant net damage or anything like that. So random pings of damage can and have hurt. You know when you when both deep dives are sniped out of hand early on or something like that. Tunnel visioning on the deep dive plan is a big weakness, and it's really easy to slip into because obviously it's what a lot of what we've been talking about, and it's kind of what a lot of the deck is geared for. But if you do tunnel vision too hard on that, you'll just lose in the remote. If they're just slipping agendas out underneath your nose while you're looking the other way. And we talked about that earlier. Is that's kind of when you need to realize when the corp is starting to win out of the remote like that. You need to punish it. You need to potentially just give up on a deep dive, or delay it significantly in order to swap some ice around and get into the remote to show the corp that you can, that they're not safe scoring out of there, and also just literally to get the agendas and stop the bleeding.
Okay, so those matchups, they're probably the ones where they're, first of all, actively trying to build a scoring remote. So Glacier decks just kind of in general.
Yeah, I was worried about running into Leo. I have yet to face Leo in this. Leo's lost a bit of steam in the meta lately. So I suspect Leo could. It kind of depends on the exact construction of the Leo deck and the order they get their ice out in. If they can see a lot of their bioroids really early, or at the right times rather, it can stuff a lot of what I'm trying to do. On the other hand, I guess they are getting rid of their ice for me, so
How do you find the Melia U matchup?
I I haven't actually run into it too much, just a handful of times. For the most part, though, I don't know if I care that much, um, because that's they can do the melee's you thing. It's like during a deep dive turn, I'm going to hit. Well, so let me walk that back. Actually, it's kind of funny because during a deep dive turn, I'm going to hit the server they guessed eventually, but I have, what is it, like a 2 in 3 chance of not hitting it on the first run. And so it's actually there's a really good probability I just turn it off and then just make the other runs and it kind of is fine. And if I do hit it, then they get to do a little bit of agenda manipulation, um, potentially agenda manipulation, card manipulation in general. But if I'm deep diving, like there's like what at most one card on the top of the deck is changing, so it's it's fine for the most part. It means there's I'm actually just deep diving 7 instead of 8, which is still a big number. So
Now that I'm like thinking about it, if you don't expect there to be agendas in archives, then archives is just always going to be a very safe click one run.
it is a
Because,
pretty safe one. Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if you during a deep dive attempt, if you hit, so I have mentioned kind of a little combo, an example combo turn earlier.
Mhm.
If at any point during that, before you actually fire the deep dive, you hit an agenda, the whole thing just becomes almost trivial, like comically trivial to pull off, and you've disrupted them so badly. You had alluded to a 6 point turn at one point. That happened one time where I accidentally accessed I think 4 agendas that turn, and it was kind of brutal because it turns out Tau and Hermes do not say once per turn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, like, so I had originally asked the Melies question because I was thinking that maybe like, oh, if you change their ice placement on centrals, it makes it harder for them to play the mini game because now
Hmm.
they've got to take into account the swapsies. But then it's just like, oh wait, you just run archives.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's not actually that simple.
Yeah. I
I
mean, it
I
kind of
will.
depends. If they know that you're on deep dive and archives is open, there's a good chance they actually might call archives on the turn they suspect you're going for it.
Right,
Um,
but at that point in time, they if they do anything, it means they bin the top card of R&D. So instead of deep diving for what is it, 8 instead of 7, now you're just deep diving for 9 instead of
yeah.
8.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
And
it's funny too because also typically on these quest turns you're going to try, if possible, if it lines up correctly, you're going to try to run the most difficult to run server first to
mhm,
make sure that that is out of because once that's out of the way, then you know that you can do the 2 easier ones. And if the first one fails, then you just abort the turn and do something else entirely. And so,
okay.
if there's a good chance they're going to call their weakest one usually. Um, and so if you run the most difficult one first and manage to get in, then you just disabled it anyway. So,
There you go. That's another good point to make, I think, that you want to do the hard stuff first
mhm.
and save the easy stuff for last.
Yeah, you want to know as early as possible if deep dive is possible. And
Hmm.
so if it lines up, if you have the econ lined up and all of the tools are in place and everything, you want to try to do click one run the server with the most ice or the server with the biggest ice or whatever it is.
I will say I did just think of another possible use of that two influence that you've got on the pinhole
Oh
threadings.
yeah.
Docklands Pass.
Yeah, I've wondered if I should add some other thing like that to the deck. That's a good call. That might be okay.
It sure is a funny one,
Uh-huh.
like if you're having to hit HQ for a deep dive turn anyway, you
Mhm.
might as well maximize your ability to, hit it. Especially since, as you mentioned, if once you steal an agenda in the middle of a deep dive turn, it just becomes trivial.
Yeah.
Then yeah, just give yourself set yourself up for success.
Yeah. Nope, that's a very good idea.
So, in that case, time for the last question. Where do you see this deck or down in general going in the metagame? And as I am saying these words out loud, I am just remembering who I am talking to.
I have no idea. So I've thought about this a bit. I don't know how much of my recent success with this deck is due to the deck. Do I have any hand in it at all? Is it a function of did I just get like crazy lucky paths through these tournaments? I have no idea. So, do I think Tau is like, going to take the world by storm? No. It hasn't. Smarter players than I have put their minds to these Tau decks. You mentioned one earlier. Um, but I do think that Tau is better than generally given credit for, in a competitive sense, says the non-competitive player. Um, because I do think that IDs like Tau and cards like Tau in general, honestly, I think this applies to SEPA as well. Um, if they cards like this tend to get overlooked when the ability to quantify the value from the card is difficult. So Tau does not tell you draw a card, gain a credit, whatever. Um, and it can be basically impossible to try to equate the value of swapping ice around with, how many clicks did this gain me over the course of a game or something like that, or credits or whatever it is. And I think then a lot of people kind of overlook that, in favor of cards that, like Moosely Hot or Seb or something like that, that kind of have a much more straightforward value proposition. But these tend to be my favorite cards, are the ones that do have these kind of like sideways benefits that you can't fully put into, a direct resource benefit or advantage. And so I think it does deserve cards. And Tao's been out for a while. Tao's pretty thoroughly explored for the most part. But SEPA, I think these cards do deserve to be explored more, and given more serious thought.
I mean, speaking as the first person who was steamrolled by you on your surge to dominance over these two tournaments, even if it was in the other matchup. Um, I don't necessarily think that your wins and the success that you saw with this deck were accidental. Like obviously luck played a decent component to it,
Of
but
course.
you built decks that fit your play style and found things that you wanted to do, and as both the corp and the runner presented questions to your opponent that a lot of the time they didn't know how to answer, and I think that might be the strength of an ID like Dow in this metagame in general, is the ability to present questions that people are going to have difficulty answering.
Yeah. No,
So
that's a good point.
I'd certainly love to see it take down more tournaments, to especially because it has those intangible benefits going for it.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, where this is a game and we're playing it for fun. So if a fun looking deck like this can be successful at any level, I would say that's a good thing.
Yeah. Here's to hoping we see more weird stuff out there.
All right. Well, anyway, yeah, like I said, congratulations on the tournament successes. Really proud of you, buddy.
Thank
All
you.
right, folks, that's all the questions I've got, so it's time to compile the code. This has been Deck Documentation. I'm your host, Argon, with Wigglestick, signing off. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye!
Bye.